Hello everyone, my name is Albert, also known as Banshee, and today we're going to be doing a little bit of a different video. I wanted to give a in-depth walkthrough or guide to 60 card Death and Taxes. Hopefully you guys enjoy it. Hopefully it's helpful for all the new players. I know there's a lot of people who are wanting to pick up the archetype after checking it out, seeing people play it. They're interested. They think the name's super cool. Hopefully this will help you kind of build your deck and have an understanding of how it works, how it runs, and I'll show you guys 3 different versions of lists at the very end of the video. So here we go. As said before, Death and Taxes has a lot of moving pieces, a lot of different cards, and a lot of different interactions. Hopefully this will help you guys kind of formulate your first list. Our first card is Thalia, Garden of Thraben, one of the most important cards to the deck. She's our main tax card. She really does a great job at slowing down our opponents. Any type of non-creature spell, they have to pay 1, but watch out, that does affect your own spells. But she's also an effective threat thanks to her first strike, and she's also a great blocker, and people just have some issues with her. So she's great. Next up is Aether Vial, kind of the linchpin, the bread and butter, the gas that lets the engine go. This is the main kind of cohesive piece to the deck. Allows us to put our creatures onto the battlefield at instant speed, kind of makes them uncounterable, and then allows us to stay ahead as kind of like Soul Ring boosts people up in Commander. We can pay for 2 mana spells, 3 mana spells, or 1 mana spells with Aether Vial. Again, it does take a couple turns to charge up, but has so many applications, so many tricks with cards like Flicker Wisp, Skyclave Apparition, giving those flash or allowing them to be put in at instant speed, even Thalia for blocks, and a couple other tricks with some of the sideboard cards. Stoneforge Mystic is one of the next major pieces in any single Death and Taxes deck. She really is our biggest threat, or allows us to throw our biggest threat onto the battlefield, and allows us to stay relevant as it helps us grab cards like Lion Sash or even Sword of X and Y. Her big utility threats and answers are Cauldron Complete, and like I said, Lion Sash, Sword of X and Y. As you see here listed, usually there's 3 cards to a Stoneforge package, sometimes 4, sometimes even 5, depending on the deck builder, the way the meta goes, and what you want to do. Again, typically you got 1 or 2 living weapons, your Lion Sash, and then a sword or 2. Next up, Flicker Wisp. One of the most kind of underrated cards when a new player is looking at the list, but actually our best card, probably one of our best cards. Flicker Wisp is a ultimate Swiss Army knife, as I have it labeled there. It flies, swings in the air. It resets cards like Cauldron Complete when people take care of our Germ. It doubles our ETB effects with our removal, like Skyclave Apparition and Stoneforge Mystic, as well as Solitude. And then it takes out threats that our opponent may have for a turn or until the next end step. And then also can take our opponent off of a land. One cool trick with Flicker Wisp is if you vial Flicker Wisp in at end step, your opponent's card will not come in, or whatever card will not come in until the beginning of the next end step. So it's a whole turn without that singular card. It's great for handling cards like Ensnaring Bridge or cards like Planeswalkers. Keeps them out for a whole turn. Obviously, your opponent can't activate them, and you get to swing in underneath the Ensnaring Bridge. Next up, we kind of have our protection. Most lists are running Giver of Runes. She's our main form of protection. Some other cool little options are Ephemerate, as in response to removal, you can cast Ephemerate, protect your stuff. Same thing kind of with Touch the Spirit Realm, and even Flicker Wisp when you have your vial on 3. Like I said, Giver is going to be the biggest one though. She protects from any color and even colorless, but make sure you're watching out. If you're giving protection from colorless to one of your equipped creatures, like your Cauldron Complete Germ or your Batterskull Germ, or anything carrying one of those, or a sword, those equipment will fall off. So that's just something to note, something to watch out for, as well as if you're running Ephemerate. If you give your creature Pro White, Ephemerate can no longer target your creature. Just a little tidbit. A cool part about Touch of Spirit Realm, though, is that channel ability actually lets it go at instant speed. Next up is our removal package. I'd say something that's core to Death and Taxes. Got your Skyclave Apparitions and your Solitudes. 4 of each are typically what most decks run, but Path to Exile sometimes thrown in there. Just depends on if you're running Leonin Arbiter or not. Leonin Arbiter is our next card, actually. As Leonin Arbiter is kind of put in and taken out of lists, I do want to dedicate a whole page to it. It's super important. It stops your opponents from searching their libraries, shuts off fetch lands, unless, of course, your opponent pays 2, but there's a lot of interaction. When running Leonin Arbiter, most people will opt to run 8 different destroy lands, like Ghost Quarter and Field of Ruin, as well as Path to Exile as a removal spell, as Leonin Arbiter being on the battlefield really slows your opponent down. There's no downside to Path to Exile or Ghost Quarter and Field of Ruin. Just make sure you're watching out, as Leonin Arbiter does have a tricky interaction, as if you're playing your Leonin Arbiter and Stoneforge, make sure you play them in the right order, or pay attention. Make sure before you cast your Stoneforge, you're paying 2 to the search, or before that search trigger goes on the stack. Another thing about Leonin Arbiter is people are putting it in the sideboard now as a fun little trick. I've seen Death and Catmix do it. I've done it. It's great. Stops a lot of big meta decks right now. But it's a card that I'll always have in my heart, and it has just a lot of fun interactions, even with cards like Ephemerate. If you're running it, that Leonin Arbiter ability does stack, and it actually does not use the stack. So in response to a fetch, you can Violent an Arbiter, or if you have an Arbiter on board and your opponent pays for it, you can Ephemerate it, Arbiter comes back, and your opponent does have to pay the additional 2. It's kind of cool. Next up, we kind of have our taxes, more of our taxes. I describe that as any effect that slows or stops our opponent, and many of our taxes cards end up being sideboard cards now, but these are some of the core ones that I like to play. I know a lot of other taxes players have been jamming these in their decks. Esper Sentinel is a great 1-drop. It's great to throw a sword onto Esper Sentinel, make your opponent have to pay 3 when they cast non-creature spells, and it also draws cards, which gives you card advantage. Archon of Emeria slows your opponents down, stops them from casting more than 1 spell each turn, and then also slows them down by making their non-basics enter tapped. Most people are playing a ton of non-basics. This is modern. Archon is fantastic. Play it. And then next up, we have Elite Spellbinder. One of the also newer cards. All these cards are new-ish within the last 2 years. Elite Spellbinder, basically when it comes in, has the body of a Flicker Wisp, but makes your opponent exile a card from their hand, and then they can cast that, but it costs 2 more to cast. So it really does stop decks that are relying on 1 card. It slows them down for 2 turns, which is just absolutely fantastic. Next up, we have our mana base. Plains. People play a lot of Plains in Death and Taxes. It's a mono whitelist. Of course, you can play Plains. People play anywhere from 7 to 15, sometimes even more. But right now, the number that I'm running is 12. I recommend that Death and Taxes, if you're playing the deck, you're running anywhere between 22 and 24 lands. I'm finding that the more experienced pilots are running on 22, and then 23 is usually a good place to start if you're new, and then 24 lands if you're playing a lot of lands that die, like Urza's Saga. Okay, our utility lands. These are the other missing connection to our mana base. These are the lands that you'd obviously fill in for. If you're running 12 lands, you still have, 11 more utility lands to go. These are the ones you're going to look at. There's a couple different builds you can run. Right now, one of the very popular builds are running 4 Blast Zone, 4 Seat of the Empire Iganjos, and then 1 Iganjo Castle, as well as most lists mix in some type of Horizon land, like Horizon Canopy, one of the ones that pings you, taps for white, and then lets you draw a card, as well as Urza's Saga. I also listed in here Field of Ruin. I know Ghost Quarter's missing, but Ghost Quarter's another one. Any type of destroy land. These are just pretty common ones that people are running. Also to note, Flagstones of Trocaire and Ghost Quarter pair up very, very nicely together. You can hit your opponent's lands with Ghost Quarter. You can also hit your own Flagstones and fetch 2 planes out of your deck, which is great for mana fixing. Great use if your opponent doesn't have any lands to destroy. It just kind of allows you to filter your deck, take more lands out, make sure you're hitting your main cards. And one of the other fun ones that I really love is Cave of the Frost Dragon. It is super powerful. If you can get it online, it's a really great late game threat to kind of have if you have an opponent taking you out of creatures. And then, of course, Blast Zone, very good in the meta. Hits Hammer Time, hits Death Shadows deck, hits any type of Murktide deck with their smaller creatures like Dragon's Rage Chandler, Ragavan, and the Ledger Shredder. Next up is the sideboard. There are a ton of sideboard cards you can run. These are some of the very common ones. A lot of people are running 3, 3, 3, and 3. 3, 3, 3, 3, and 3, so making that 15. Breton Forge Tender is one of the cards that I say should always be in the sideboard. You should always be running at least 3 copies. Draenith Magistrate, super huge in the meta right now, as a lot of people are playing Living End or Crashing Footfalls. I've even seen some Glimpse of Tomorrow decks. It stops Cascade, super important. Kataki is also great, hits all the artifact decks that people are running. Sanctifier and Vec, great graveyard hate. A lot of people are kind of pulling that one out of the sideboard though, and they are realizing that Lion Sash is doing the trick. So I've ended up putting an extra Lion Sash in my list, usually 2 Lion Sash. And then lastly, Extraction Specialist. This is a fantastic card when you're playing against any type of deck that is destroying your creatures. You're just constantly bringing your stuff back. And we're running a lot of 2 mana value or 1 mana value cards that don't care about attacking, like your Stoneforges, your Giver of Runes, even cards like Draenith. When you put it from the sideboard, you're really just wanting those tax effects, and Extraction Specialist does a great job at bringing it back. And then with lists running Ephemerate, when you flicker it or you flicker the card, obviously it resets and the card can now attack, which is kind of cool. Lastly, I have just a small list of cards that are just some other cards to consider. Some of them are taxing effects. Some of them are protection spells. I got a couple just funky cards that people wouldn't normally look at. Aven Mind Sensor is a huge one. It's like a double Leonin Arbiter, or a second version of Leonin Arbiter with Flash. Containment Priest, another one that's huge in the meta right now. You got your Maul of the Skyclaves, which is great if you need a faster grab for Stoneforge. Ambitious Farmhand is one that Death and Catmix tried out. I've tried it out. I love it. It's a great card. It basically draws you a plains every time it comes in, and then can flip into a lifelinker. Charming Prince is one that gets run in a lot of 80 card lists. I don't love the card. I know a lot of people do. People recommend it all the time to me. And one of the last ones that I put on there was Sanctum Prelate. Bottom row, when it enters the battlefield, you get to choose a number, and it works as kind of like a Chalice of the Void for non-creature spells, which I think is absolutely phenomenal. And I think once more non-creature spells kind of start getting played, or there's a lot of similar combo decks, Sanctum Prelate can come in. It's just a little slow in my opinion. Now let's go check out those deck lists. Okay, first of all, I'm going to preface this with the numbers might be a little skewed on these. I put these deck lists in from the versions that I own, so a lot of these are the more expensive versions of the card. So you can get the deck for cheaper than what I have posted on the side, except for the budget deck. I tried to make it as cheap as possible. So I'll just go over this one. This one is one that Death and Catmix played, and he's run a couple variations of this list, but this seems to be the prime one that he's running. It's kind of interesting because it actually looks like a Death and Taxes list that you would play a year ago. This is a similar list to what I started playing when I first started playing Death and Taxes. You got your, like I said, you have your protection, you have your tax with Thalia, Archon of Emeria, your Stoneforge threat package, your Flicker Wisp utility creature, And then you have Skyclave Apparition and Solitude. Of course, your Aether Vials, just stock in the list. This one's running Ephemerate. It's very, very powerful. It protects, it doubles your enters the battlefield. It lets you kind of get Solitude in for 1 mana and pitching a card, which is super awesome. And it gets 2 ETB triggers off of it, and then a third one if it sticks around for a whole turn for a rebound to trigger. Another note about this list is 4 Blast Zone, 4 Eiganjo Seed of the Empire. I personally run the 2 Horizon Canopy. I know that Catmix has been running just 14 planes. I like the draw with the Horizon Canopy. It's kind of nice. But he 5-0s and I don't. You guys have seen my performances. Anyways, looking at the sideboard, pretty stock. Brenton Fortender, Drannith Magistrate to take down Cascade. Kataki, handling those artifact decks. Leonin Arbiter, super fun in the sideboard. People aren't expecting it. And then Extraction Specialist to save your creatures. The one thing I will say about this list is it is very fun, very technical. I love this list. This is my new favorite Death and Taxes list, and this is what I would recommend people work towards if you're on a budget and you're wanting to build up to a list. Next up, another Magic the Gathering YouTuber for Death and Taxes, actually Chip K Plays, kind of pioneered this list. I have changed it up a bit. It's not one of his stock lists, but the concept came from him. He was the first one to kind of pioneer it. This one runs Esper Sentinel and a ton of other kind of artifacty cards to make sure that we have a high artifact count, because we are also running Urza Saga, which includes running a Shadow Spear in order to be able to fetch it with Saga, as well as Pithing Needle and Relic of Progenitus in the sideboard. This is one of those lists running Touch of the Spirit Realm. Again, it's a great card people don't expect. It doubles as removal and an extra Flicker Wisp effect. One thing I will say about this list is it generates a ton of card advantage, but it is a little bit more expensive than the other lists. It's a lot more expensive than the budget list. Both of them are, though. But this one's great. Honestly, I love this list. This is one that I play in my LGS. This deck does get free wins with Urza Saga because Urza Saga is so good. Probably a little bit easier for a newer player to pilot. But Death and Taxes is kind of a grueling list when you first start playing. You will lose a lot, but I promise you it's pretty rewarding when you are able to place at a local event. It's kind of fun. I'm able to usually place top 4 every couple weeks if I have made sure to pay attention or get enough sleep the night before, because those events end up being pretty late. Lastly, we have our budget list. This one is one that I hope you guys are able to, if you're wanting to learn how to play Death and Taxes and you just want to maybe have some of these cards, right now is honestly the time to buy most of these cards. This deck has gotten so much cheaper than it was before thanks to all the wonderful reprints that we've had. We've been lucky to have an Aether Vial reprint. When I started, this was a $30 card to buy 1 copy. Now you can get the whole playset for $45. Leonin Arbiter was about $4 or $5 when I started. Thalia was about $12. She's down to, $7 for a playset, a base copy. And I love the art. This is one of my favorite Thalia arts. Of course, Flicker Wisp has always been a cheap card. But yeah, so this is like I said, a budget list. This one is really focusing on this Leonin Arbiter plan. This list is a lot more budget because we're not running Solitude as a removal spell, but we're instead running Path to Exile. We're still running our Skyclaves, we're running our Flicker Wisps, but we're also running Restoration Angel as a threat and a way to protect some of our creatures. All around great card. And then the land base, this is a pretty basic land base. You got your plains, 8 of them. You have your Horizon land with Silent Clearing. You got your Ghost Quarter, Field of Ruin for when you're blowing up people's lands with Leonin Arbiter. And then Eiganjo Seed of the Empire because it's a great protection land. It is so powerful. You catch so many people off guard. So I wouldn't skip out on it. For the sideboard, I kept it as cheap as I possibly could. The only thing I'd probably throw in there would be Kataki War's Wages or Drannith Magistrates if you have a couple extra bucks to spend. But Brenton Force Ender will carry you through a lot of matchups with Fury. It basically counters Fury. And then, of course, your burn matchups. Revoker is going to be your Pithing Needle style effect for anything that's using activated abilities like Yawgmoth, Sanctifier, and Vec. Hits graveyards with that are black and red and gives you protection from a lot of those destroy spells. Archon of Emeria, super powerful card. Like I said, make sure your opponent only able to cast one, and yourself, one spell per turn, which we were able to get around with the Aether Vial. And then an extra Restoration Angel in case you need that flicker effect, as well as Settle the Wreckage is kind of a fun, haha, opponent, I just blow up all your attacking creatures. It's kind of cool. Anyways, I hope you guys have enjoyed this video. I hope you guys have gained value. If you have any questions about any of these lists or any of these different strategies or different cards, ask questions in the comment below. If you're an experienced player, please, if I missed anything, put it in the comments below. I love to read it. I love the help. And then these links to these deck lists will be in the description below as well. Anyways, thank you guys so much for joining me. Hope you guys have a great rest of your day. Bye. If you like what I do here, please consider subscribing to the channel as well as liking and sharing the videos. It really does help. And if you do this with your favorite YouTuber as well, I'm sure that they would appreciate it as much as I do.